Hello once again and welcome. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen. I'm the editor and VP of Streaming Media. It's been a while since we've been together in webinar format. It's good to be here. I am here mostly behind the scenes today, while Tim Siglin from Help Me Stream Research Foundation and Ali Hojat from Intertrust ExpressPlay talk about secure streaming and broadcast workflows. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. If you do have any questions for our speakers, please put them in the Q&A tab. You can find that button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And that's just makes it easier for us to keep track of them than if they are put in the chat. On the other hand, the chat's been pretty active. We got folks from Kentucky, Detroit, the YVR, New York. And I can also welcome Ali Hojat from Orange County. So Ali, why don't you join? Hey, Ali, how are you?
Hi, Eric. I'm good. Hello from sunny California, everyone. It's great to be here. I love it as like in the chat, everyone is putting where they're dialing in from. This is awesome.
Excellent.
I'm excited about today. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. Yes, it is also sunny here in Wisconsin, but I'm guessing it is about 60 or 70 degrees colder than it is where you are.
Almost.
And so, Ali, Intertrust ExpressPlay teamed with Streaming Media and the Help Me Stream Research Foundation to produce a survey that we ran at the end of 2021, looking into secure streaming and broadcast workflows. And everyone who's attending today will receive an email with a link to download the research brief that we've produced immediately after the webinar. So keep your eye on that. And if you missed that email or want to refer other people, it'll be up on streamingmedia.com in the research section fairly soon after the webinar. But Ali, what drove you and Intertrust ExpressPlay to do this survey?
So as we were getting ready to start 2022, we wanted to get more insight from the industry about both the streaming and broadcast and how they play against each other and how the industry is moving in terms of protecting the content delivered from either streaming or broadcast delivery. And so looking at different anti-piracy solutions used and how is like the consumer experience as they look into new content and look at TV as the center of, again, their living room to watch their favorite show. So that's basically triggered us to start thinking about what's the new directions and kind of try to get patterns about where the industry is going between broadcast and streaming, as well as the anti-piracy services needed in order to protect their basically premium content.
That leads me right into introducing Tim Siglin, because we just had a conversation. Hello, Tim from Tennessee.
Yeah. Hey, it's a little rainy here, so I guess I'm mid-temperature to you all, but a little bit of rain. And right. Thanks for having me, Eric and Ali. Obviously, thank you for doing this project with Streaming Media and Help Me Stream Research Foundation.
And we have someone here from Luxembourg as well. So I have to.
I noticed they had to put in parentheses Europe. So
Europe, just in case, yeah, because there are Luxembourgs scattered throughout the US too. But Tim, we were just talking on SMAF, SM Advanced Forum, which is an informal discussion that a number of us have every month. And one of the topics we talked about was the convergence of broadcast and streaming and what consumers are looking for. So it's kind of actually a nice lead into this. But before we jump into the discussion of the survey and the results, tell us a little bit about what Help Me Stream Research Foundation does.
Sure. Well, just like we say in the name, we're a research foundation, which means we're a 501c3 charitable organization here in the States. First one in the industry that we think, and our job is to, besides doing things like these surveys where we work to get a pulse on what's going on in the industry, we also collect old technology. And when I say old technology, typically 6 or 7 year old smartphones, laptops, desktops, take those technologies, repackage them into streaming servers, and then use the smartphones and tablets as the streaming receivers to put into classroom in a box to send to parts of the world that don't have streaming. In fact, the UN came out with a report recently that said 1.3 billion people have never used the internet. So we're really focused on taking old tech from the first world, repackaging and reusing it, and then sending it out to emerging economies.
So if you're watching and you have some of that old tech around, I just shipped a box with a couple of old Mac Minis in it down to Tim in Tennessee, and I helped him. I'm the my title, I think, is chairman, right, of the Help Me Stream
Correct.
Research Foundation. So the foundation is always looking for that kind of equipment.
And ironically, let me just say too, real quick, Eric, those Mac Minis that you sent me, I desperately needed for another device that Apple had made 10 years ago that no new Apple device will actually access. So yeah, old gear we want for sure.
All right, and I know we all have some of it laying around, but let's turn to the present again. And Tim, I will let you take it away, and I'll move on to the first slide where I believe you're going to talk about who took the survey and what we can take away from that, and then we'll move on from there.
Sounds good. Yeah, so here in the first slide, let's just talk a little bit about demographics before we delve into the details of what the survey provided. 225 responses, about 70% from the US, about 20% from Europe, and then the rest of the responses scattered across the world. As you can see, when we look at industries, we ask people to self-categorize what industry they're in. We have the the typicals, the broadcasters, the operators, OTT providers. We also have a decent number of people in the educational, college, university, secondary. We have some in financial services. We have this time around about 2% in online betting for gambling and sportsbook, which has grown throughout the pandemic from some of our earlier surveys where it was maybe 0.02%. So that one's actually grown quite a bit. And then of course, religious organizations. When we sort of drill down through then onto the next slide, what we see here is we ask people to sort of just look at what of the following subcategories they fall into. And Ollie, I'm going to let you talk a little bit about these subcategories because I know these were of interest to you.
Yes, no, thank you for that. Obviously, besides the detailed demographics that you showed, we kind of wanted to know from which side of the streaming broadcast or content, all the respondents come from. So we kind of wanted to identify the percentage of the audience between streaming platforms. For example, as you see, 37% be D2C streaming, or about 15% from the sports streaming. I mean, that helps us. So again, as we look into the future questions that was in the survey, we can drive the conclusions better. You can see about 25%, that's basically the cable and pay TV side, plus the OTA broadcaster. So 25%-ish were coming from, again, the broadcast and pay TV side, and content owners being about 14%. And as we go throughout the questions and we see more conclusions from anti-piracy services used, or the feeling of, again, future of broadcast or convergence of broadcast and streaming, it's good to have, again, these in the back of mind of basically who were the kind of breakdown of the audience in terms of their focus in the industry.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember, as Ali said, that sort of 25% that were cable and pay TV or OTA broadcaster, because as we get later into some of the questions, you're going to see responses that if you're in that 25%, you'd say, well, that doesn't necessarily fit to my model. But we remember that the majority of the people who take this survey actually come out of the streaming industry. The other thing we did is we said, okay, now tell us what's your typical viewer size. And as we see here, about half of the respondents said they average on a per month basis for viewers or subscribers under 10,000. And then we had about 30% who said, they did up to 1 million, and then another 21% or so that said they did greater than 1 million. We also had asked a question around concurrence. We don't have a slide on this, but we just wanted to get a general sense to understand whether we're talking about small audience sizes, especially for live concurrence, or larger, and it fell fairly in the middle. So Eric, we can go on to the next slide. So from this standpoint, we ask about a couple different things, and I'm going to focus on the left chart, and then Ollie's going to talk a little bit about the right chart. But what we've got here is a number of different device types. In the last few surveys we've done, we've really wanted to understand what subscribers or consumers are using to consume content. What we find here, there were a lot of small individual responses to things like only desktop or only laptop, but we rolled up a number of these into an overall group of overall groupings. And so we've got about a third for desktops and laptops, about another third for mobile devices. Then we have about 20% who do OTT, set-top boxes or smart TVs, 10% doing gaming, 10% doing pay TV, and then about 2.8% doing gaming. And one reason we keep gaming in here, even though it's a small number, is we're seeing a continued rise across multiple surveys of people falling back to their gaming consoles to consume streaming video. And I think that's an actually really fascinating point, that as gaming continues to grow, consumption of all kinds of media on gaming consoles are growing. Ali, I'll let you talk briefly to the slide or the part on the right, but before you do that, I guess, what's your take on the fragmentation of primary media viewing devices?
Sure. So I think the audience is going to see more details or breakdown of this left chart in the report. So if you recall, the team, I think mobile devices were actually 20%, and the tablets were about, the smartphone were 20% and tablets were 14%. So that 34% breaks down in that way. And desktop and laptop, I think they were kind of even around 17%. So that kind of tells us that basically mobile smartphones, 20% were kind of the largest piece, and then the OTT set-top boxes again, and smart TVs being the other 20%, which is again the largest part. I mean, obviously the device fragmentation is really what you see here. So I mean, consumers want their content on every kind of device, so you cannot just skip a platform. You have to have your content available on all the devices. And you see again, either smartphone or the TV itself, smart TV or the OTT boxes which are connected to the TV are going to be again mainstream and continue to be the largest portion of again content consumption. Now, looking at the chart on the right, so the reason for this was we kind of wanted to know what are kind of the viewers of our audience or the respondents, what what type of industry they're consuming the content. So we wanted to see viewers, are they mainly using the streaming content or using broadcast or both? And so as you can see, we see the 63% were really only using the streaming content. And we're gonna reference this as the other slides come up, that basically the majority of the respondents have been focusing on the streaming content. Their customers or viewers have been consuming content on the streaming side. 10% traditional broadcast. So again, that aligns to what we saw in the previous slide. It aligns to what you see on the left. That basically says the set-top boxes are 9.5%. So we do see again a portion of the audience being focused on traditional broadcast and set-top boxes, but the majority being focused on streaming and either streaming only, or again focusing on all kinds of devices to get to consume this streaming content.
And one of the things we like to see from a research standpoint is that consistency across answers. So this 10% traditional broadcast here tied to the 9.5% on pay TV on the chart on the left, tied to the 9% or 10% on the previous slide, saying that they do OTA. That tells us we're getting a consistent set of answers, which makes the further responses more valid. This 63% number is a really big number, though, for our audience to understand that as we go through the rest of these slides, even those who are saying we're only doing streaming still have an understanding that there is a place for broadcast television to play for the foreseeable future. In fact, that's a nice segue, I guess, into the next slide, Eric.
Tim, before we do, we have a couple of questions
Sure.
from the audience that are related to this and the demographics. So let's address those before we move on. The first one, could you make clear the market segment? Is it global or any specific market? I know that in the brief that we publish, we break down where people are responding from, but could you talk a little bit about where people have responded from for the survey?
Sure. I can't remember if I mentioned in the very first slide, but roughly 70% from the US, North America. Sorry, I should say we don't ask specifically US. Roughly 20% from Europe, and the remainder from the rest of the world. Typically, what we had seen in the past was that rest of the world would be heavily weighted toward APAC, so the Asia Pacific region. But what we've seen in the last three surveys that we've done, State of Streaming, as well as this one, is that South America is now the third highest response group that we get. So we are asking this on a global basis. You know, we can drill down through to each of those individuals. But one of the things that we actually decided to do for our sort of overall audience was drill down between those who generate revenue from online video and those who don't. And that's where the majority of the bifurcation will come throughout the rest of the survey webinar today.
Excellent. The other question has to do with devices. Scott Barnett is asking, and this is, I guess, not something we actually dug into in the research, but in your observations of the industry and what we've seen in the research, is the proprietary nature of the smart TV working against its growth as a consumption device? At least phones and tablets have two basic ecospheres to work with relating to streaming apps. And this reflects on a conversation we just had recently on another forum where we were talking about how people are finding it perhaps easier to, rather than have a smart TV in each room and perhaps a different smart TV, settle on a particular device, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, so that there would be consistency from room to room and then consistency with their mobiles and tablets. What are your thoughts on the smart TV market and its prospect for growth?
Ali, I've got an opinion, but I want to open it to you if you'd like to go first on your opinion.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say what I think about it. I think this was maybe true in a few years back, but now I feel that most of the smart TVs are offering the same type of a streaming usage that you can have on Android or Apple, iOS devices. I mean, today you can have all the SWAT apps on the TVs, smart TVs, connected TVs directly. There's quite a lot number of fast channels, right? The free ad supported TV, again, apps, and that's growing crazy. And again, the broadcasters or pay TV operators are looking how they can get directly to the smart TV. So I feel like that's enabling, again, the user or the smart TV to be the center of all sorts of contents the same way we can use with, the smart TVs. I mean, my son two days ago was just watching YouTube on TV, and it was very easy, right? He was just using the content suggestion coming up on YouTube, and he would see all sorts of soccer games or highlights one after another. And the same thing, you do it on your smartphone. So that's, again, my opinion, if I understood the question correctly.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Scott, that we do have a chart later on that talks about sort of the different proprietary platforms for smart TVs. And you'll see there's fragmentation in that market. If you look back at Android devices from years ago, and I say years ago, I deal with them on a daily basis when people give me their old KitKat based Android device or their Oreo Android device. Every single one of those devices had a different interface on it. I think as we move forward and we try to get to sort of a bifurcated model of, say, Apple TV external set-top boxes versus Android TV on a number of the smart TV platforms, assuming that Google doesn't deprecate it like it did Google TV, over the past decade or so, we may get to a point where we have sort of those two models. Having said that, I think one of the reasons the conversation came up in the previous forum was a customer may have a version of a Fire Stick, and then suddenly Amazon no longer supports that Fire Stick. So then their question is, do I go buy a smart TV and assume that the smart TV itself is going to be maintained by Amazon as a device for the next 5, 6, 7 years? Or do I just go off and cast it from my phone because I'm comfortable with my phone? I do think the nature of the fragmentation of the operating systems on smart TV platforms does work against, even though, as Ollie says, the apps are there, it does work against it because it's a different user interface for each TV you have in your house. So if the first TV you had was a TCL, say, and it had a smart TV platform from 6 years ago, and then you brought in a Sony and it had a platform that was newer, and you brought in an LG and it had a newer platform, yes, that's frustrating from a consumer standpoint. I don't think consumers necessarily think through those things when they buy TVs because they don't really have a chance to try out that, for lack of a better term, electronic program guide or app interface until the TV's set up in their house.
Very good. We'll move on now. From this point on, I think we'll save all the questions until the end just to make sure we can get through the rest of our slides, but those seem germane to what we were talking about at the moment. So I'll move on to the next slide now and back to Tim.
Actually, I'm going to turn this one to Ollie first to talk about the main advantages of direct to TV broadcast. And I will reiterate, 63% of the people who responded to this see themselves as streaming only. So these answers are not just people in the broadcast space saying, this is the broadcast. This is everybody in the survey saying these are the advantages of direct to TV broadcast.
Yes, good point, Tim. Obviously, recently we have heard a lot about, direct to TV service offering, whether it's on the streaming side or broadcast side, right? And I've heard different announcements. So our goal was here to see how the audience see the benefit of that. And obviously we categorized several answers for them. Reducing the cost of the external devices and eliminating the external devices like set-top box and cam modules was obviously the main or highest ranking response. And that's, again, everybody wants to have less devices, right? And when you say direct to TV, from the operator point of view, you can save on the additional logistics. And from the consumer side, it would be, again, paying less for your service. So that's a no-brainer. But what is interesting here, I think what comes after and the combination of those two. So content aggregation across both broadcast and OTT, right? It got quite a good percentage overall, right? As the second ranking. And combining that with offering the operator app on the TV from the broadcast operators, right? So if you can have the same user experience for the broadcast content on the TV, similar to the other OTT streaming services, that's what the consumer is looking for. And I mean, idea is that I want to buy a TV from retail store, come home and watch the content on the TV and don't care if it's a streaming or broadcast content. And that's really where you can have the operator app that does the broadcast delivery or of the content with a similar user interface as the streaming, with a similar business model as the streaming, 3 months of free subscription and so on. And that enables also the content aggregation between different services on the user interface. So that's kind of the theme that I'm seeing here. And that's, combining 24 plus 18%, that's 42%, 43%, which is going to be actually even above the 30% of just the cost associated with external devices. So that's kind of my takeaway from here. And also, obviously, again, this is not just, as Tim said, from the broadcast related respondents, but everybody, 63% from the streaming only, industry. Tim, I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
Well, I was going to say, I think this question summarizes the fact that, we have to think about hybrid approaches. While people may view all the content on a single screen in their living room or their man cave or wherever they're doing it, ultimately, it's an aggregation of a whole bunch of different types of content. And it would be much simpler if they could actually do it all directly from a single remote to a single screen. And I think this is the other model that we see with the announcement of Skyglass, Comcast X series and that kind of thing, really trying to essentially reduce the cost of logistics by eliminating the need for set-top boxes and cams by putting them directly into the screen itself, being provided by your content service provider, so to speak. So, Eric, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so here, we sort of said, what's your take on direct television broadcast? Now it's, how does your organization look at this view of converging security solutions for broadcast and OTT? Sort of understanding what we said in the prior slide, what's fascinating is almost half said they never really thought about a converged approach. And that would make sense for the pure play OTTs, but even for them, they're looking to put apps on smart televisions, just like they're looking to put apps into set-top boxes. So it was quite interesting to me to see that the mental shift has to happen to say, look, all the content's being consumed on a single box, whether it's coming through an OTT stick or whether it's coming through an app on that particular device. The consumer sees that as essentially television. They don't differentiate necessarily between what's coming over the air, what's coming through their cable provider, their MVPD, or the OTT app itself. Secondly, people do, or at least a third agree that it's more cost efficient to have a single converged approach to it. And then 20% say, yeah, you know what, don't worry about it because broadcast TV is going to cease as we continue to move to streaming. I don't discount that, but what I do say from the survey is that gradually cease may be a really long tail of 10 to 15 years here. Ali, what's Intertrust ExpressPlay's take on this sort of converged approach?
So yeah, I mean, as you said, we also believe that down the road, 10, 15 years, it's going to be all streaming. But as we see and talk to customers, broadcast is not going anytime soon. And but enabling the users, the viewers, to get the same user experience with the streaming and broadcast on their own favorite device, which is TV. That's mainly the goal here. So that's why we have been thinking and focusing on how actually converged security can be implemented securely, right? One of the main point is that today there are two different silos of content protection for broadcast and streaming, right? Conditional access versus DRM. And there is obviously different vendors involved. There's obviously different integration points. As you see in the future slides, we're going to actually dive deep into details of what would be the right approach if there is this convergence, and how you can protect the content that is going to the devices, both broadcast and streaming, again, meeting the requirements from the content owners. So I mean, we're going to talk about this, I think, on the next slide. Maybe that's a good, it's a transition point.
Exactly. It's a perfect segue. You go ahead and take us through the next slide here.
Right, sure. So this basically was about asking the vision of broadcast TV from our audience. And obviously the biggest, the highest ranking, 142% came for smart TV will offer converged solution for broadcast and streaming, again, using HBB or ATSC 2.0. Then you see, as you again in line with the previous chart, certain audience would basically say there is no future for broadcast and it will be replaced. And again, we don't disagree, but the question is, how long does it take until we get there? And then followed by the pay TV operators will replace cable set-top boxes with the streaming only smart TV. This is really going back to you buy a TV from your pay TV operator, like Comcast, right? X-Class TV. Surprisingly, that came lower. Maybe it's because not everybody wants to buy a TV from the cable company. But again, that is again in line in terms of it the direction is you want to have your content on the TV directly without any additional devices. Now, so going back to what I was going to explain on the previous slide, enabling a converged security solution is important when there is a convergence of broadcast and streaming on the devices. So having a same security client on the devices, right, on the TVs, smart TVs that can protect basically the broadcast content and the streaming content is required in order to make sure this convergence is actually realized in the real world. So that's kind of, I think, the takeaway from this.
And I'm going to add one thing on the HBB TV and ATSC3, especially ATSC3, as it's sort of a newer technology coming forward. One reason why I personally think broadcast isn't going away anytime soon, and I have sort of expanded on this in a couple of articles over the last 2 years that are written for streaming media, is ATSC3 IP multicast. I mean, if you think about the model of being able to hit a massive number of people simultaneously viewing the same content across an IP network, multicast is the way to go. The fact that it's an over-the-air delivery and receiving, that's actually really cool, because they're one of the few parts of the industry that has the infrastructure to be able to do that. Also, the other thing to remember too is, given the fact that that's an IP network, there's nothing to say that if you dial down the quality slightly on the over-the-air broadcast, you could then also use those additional packet delta to deliver on-demand content to those same set-top boxes as well. So I think we're in the early days of seeing what the broadcast industry is going to do as a response to the traditional OTT. It may be delivering what we in the streaming world would call OTT, but just delivering it to the set-top box directly through some of those same models that the pay TV operators will do with Sky Glass or X Glass.
Yep.
All right, Eric, next slide. So on this slide, this may go back to Scott's question about the fragmentation. And if you see here, we asked the question, okay, what smart TV or set-top box operating system will become dominant over the next number of years? And what we see is the sense is that Android TV will become dominant. However, I caution, because 63% of the people taking the survey are in the streaming only space, Android TV would sort of be a natural response for them. In reality, and this is anecdotal beyond this survey, but if you sort of put equal parts broadcasters and equal parts streamers, the Android operator tier, or AOSP, would tend to come in a bit higher than this 9.1. So I caveat this slide to say there is fragmentation in the market. Android clearly has caught attention in the market, much like Google TV did 5 years ago, and Google TV 5 years before that, with the different iterations that were done, with the idea of having a single interface that everybody can work from within the TVs. But I don't see LG necessarily giving up WebOS. I don't see Samsung giving up Tizen. I don't see Huawei, especially in certain markets, giving up its operating system. So if I were going to do a takeaway from this, I would say I like the fact that Linux and its variants are at 20%. I think ultimately a lot of TVs will sort of move that direction. Whether it goes Android TV fully or AOSP fully, I don't think that's likely, but I think that will be a dominant play in the space. And Ollie, again, from Intertrust standpoint, what's your sense?
Well, I want to say something about this chart. As you see in the top, the question was formulated for both smart TV and set-top boxes. And I think that has impact about how this percentages are breakdown. Because if we had done this question on smart TV only, I'm pretty sure the ranks for Samsung and LG was much higher. because again, a lot of Android TV percentage share goes back to OTT streaming set-top boxes, right? Like Fire TV and so on, Roku TV and so on. So that's kind of the piece that I wanted to highlight. If I was, I would suggest that really for future surveys, if we do it again, we will want to break down the questions into two and do a smart TV separately from set-top boxes. And one thing I think, Tim, we kind of talked about this, we kind of missed to put the option of Roku TV here as well. And I think that's another major growth on the TV side that should be considered when you do the question around smart TV only. On the set-top box side, again, I know a big portion of this Android TV is on the set-top box based OTT streaming, as well as TVs, of course. But as you see, again, the Android open source project for Android operator tier is low. And again, that's really because the broadcast was only 10%, as you mentioned, right? And even the number of set-top boxes, pay TV set-top boxes that we showed in the previous chart was 9.5%. So that kind of really matches. Otherwise, I mean, if you do this for set-top boxes, you would see a huge, I guess, much larger percentage related to Android operator TV for the set-top box or basically the pay TV segment.
And I would agree. I think as we go forward with future versions of this kind of survey, not only Roku TV, not only Apple TV, but a number of other devices, and then splitting it as a smart TV question versus a set-top box question is a very good piece of feedback that we will certainly take into consideration with future surveys. Eric, if we can go on to the next slide. So when we began analyzing the data here, what we began to see was that questions shifted when we started asking, do you generate revenue? So for instance, educational institutions may not necessarily generate revenue with their online video. They have to have it as part of the, as part of their curriculum, but they don't break out the revenue they make from that, short of saying we have this many students as distance education. And of course, during COVID, there were parts of the school year that everybody was distance ed. So we took that and we started to segment down and ask the question. So here on the left, if we say, have you considered anti-piracy services as a means to increase subscribers and retain revenue? Overall, only 35% of respondents said yes, they'd consider that. But if we then go to those who generate revenue, we can see that it jumps to almost half. And I think that's important because as we go through some of these future slides, we'll be saying, okay, what's the impact of those who generate revenue versus those who provide video online but don't necessarily generate revenue? Now, having said that, Ali, let's talk a little bit about the perceptions of anti-piracy services.
Right. Yeah. I mean, besides knowing like what percentage are really taking anti-piracy seriously, we wanted to know their perception and actually wrote down some options to guide them through. Okay, what is the reason, both on the positive and negative side. So as you can see, this is a ranking chart, and the top two are the positive side of it and getting more traction, more than half of the percentages, showing that basically. It's considered as an ongoing cost to keep the piracy away, or something like a customer acquisition and retention cost, just like marketing. So that was basically coming mainly from those who generated revenue, could actually identify the pattern in the responses that those who generate revenue are more, positive about using anti-piracy techniques and technology. And then on the other side, the last two charts, the bars are related to the negative side of it, and that goes back to depending on the target audience and their industry, and obviously if they're not generating revenue, there might not be positive against adding extra cost to their platform for piracy, and you also see so that's essentially the one before last that basically says cost of anti-piracy is too expensive compared to smaller loss of revenue that they have, right? And then the last one being that some of them, they don't see piracy. If there is a small, service provider, you mentioned educational content, but there are certain, like, we talked about the number of views per month or the number of subscribers per month. The less than 10,000 views per month. I mean, those are the ones that maybe they're not targeted by piracy today, and that's why there is that carve off from this chart.
And I would add too, because this is ranking, don't necessarily look at the bars themselves, because obviously the bars all look relatively close to each other, but because it's ranking, it's essentially logarithmic. So far and away, it's necessary and ongoing cost to keep piracy at bay was number one. And the tools don't actually stem flow piracy was way down at the bottom. And I think that's key to understand that anti-piracy, while some people may see it as evil, it's a necessary evil if you're going to retain revenue. All right, next slide, Eric. And Ollie, I believe you're going to lead on this one.
Yes, yeah. So as we look into, again, the piracy perception, we wanted to get down into what are the different technologies and techniques that are used. And so as you see, the question was, what do people currently use, the audience, the respondent? I mean, obviously, as you see, DRM comes higher than anything else, and there could be a lot of reasons. I guess enforcement for premium content, and basically, depending again on the subscriber size and the content itself, that's one of the things that is being used more than anything else. But the interesting fact is that that's not enough, right? So we see more and more additional anti-piracy components and services that are complementary to digital rights management and starting to grow on being used with the target audience. So geo-blocking and geofencing coming up as the second rank with almost 18% was a big takeaway from this, followed obviously by content monitoring and application shielding. So the combination of, for example, content monitoring and application shielding can be almost the same as or as high as the digital rights management. And again, I want to clarify, this is our layers of the security. You have them one after another. It's not like you're going to use content monitoring but not use digital rights management. It's basically additional services. I believe, team, this was a checkbox and people check which one they're using. So there is multiple of them referenced at the same time. So again, the takeaway is really a comprehensive security solution needs more than just digital rights management. There are, again, different components that are used as geo-blocking, content monitoring, and application shielding by the streaming service providers. I want to make a point about the conditional access, which was low. And again, that goes back to the 10% of the audience being broadcast only, or only 9.5% of the devices were set-top boxes. So that's really matching because, again, only a portion of our target audience and respondents were from the pure traditional broadcast and conditional access industry. Team, I don't know, anything else you want to add?
So two other quick things. You did a really good job of highlighting everything on here. Two things just to add. Forensic watermarking, when we do surveys like this, and we've done surveys in the past, forensic watermarking comes up lower than visible watermarking. The reason is it's not necessarily a deterrent. The idea here is if there is mass piracy, that forensic watermarking allows you to build a case around the fact that you can find those imperceptible watermarks on a number of pieces of content. And then secondly, content and web monitoring, that's a proactive approach that says during a big event, like say, for instance, this past weekend with one of the games, I noticed on YouTube, the NFL did a really good job just before halftime of shutting down a whole bunch of streams. I was flipping through different streams, seeing what the quality was that people were streaming through to YouTube, and with no exception, every single one of them got pulled down 2 minutes before halftime. So, that's the kind of proactive approach you have to take beyond just expecting your DRM system or your geo-blocking system to work correctly.
Yep.
And I think, Eric, the next slide is sort of the in their own words. I'll lead off on this, Ali, and then if you want to add any comments to it. So we ask people open text questions, which means we say, hey, tell us what the largest issue is that piracy creates for your organization. And we don't put any parameters on this. They get to pick what they say. And then we go back and we put into buckets similar responses. So these are three sort of average responses under what we called content theft, brand damage, and or no impact from piracy. And you can see on the content theft side, this is a typical response in saying, look, the content's not just stolen from us for private consumption, it's stolen from us and then uploaded to a third-party site where people can watch it for free. So we, the provider, lose the ad producing revenue, but it also potentially impacts the content's right license through which they're actually showing this particular content. So one of the fallouts can be the fact that, you know, not only does it get stolen and shown for free elsewhere, but a content rights owner could potentially come back and say, you don't have a good security system in place, therefore we're not going to renew your contract to you know, to allow you to generate revenue off this content in the future. The second one, brand damage, we lose heavily due to the piracy of our content, damages our quality offerings and our brand. Someone else responded with sort of an additional piece on that, which is if the artists who use our platform sense that their content's going to be stolen, they may not just put their content up on our platform because of the fact that, you know, they are relying on us not to lose revenue for something that they post on our particular platform. And then finally, we have somebody who added, I think at one point in here, and we took it out because we edited these slightly, who said, we haven't had a major case of piracy to date. He said boldly, I believe is what we took out of it. But it, you know, the takeaway on this is, while they hadn't had a major case of piracy, their customers who own the content do have a fear of it. And therefore, one of the reasons to actually put content protection in place is to keep your paying customers who are content rights owners happy with the solutions that you're providing. Ali, what else do you want to add in this?
I think you covered it very well. Yeah, the goal here was to really break down into different patterns, and there is more of these codes in the report. But yeah, you covered it very well. Thank you, Tim.
Oh, you're welcome. And as Ali said, the report has a lot of the additional detail that we're either talking to or even has additional detail beyond what we're talking to. So since everyone who's attended the webinar gets a copy of the report, you know, within the next day or so, any questions you have on that, there's ways to access and interact with us on it. Eric, I think we've got just a couple more slides here. Okay, Ali, I'll let you start off on this unless you want me to sort of explain the difference between overall respondents and those who generate revenue.
Sure, no, that sounds good. So the next step, we try to get more details about the usage of DRM. So this is, again, obviously there is many different DRMs, either proprietary or the standards available. And so we asked which one is being used. You see White One coming up as number one, again, followed by Fair Play and Play Ready. How Huawei Voice Play coming into the picture recently, and it's coming up as the last one. Marlin, which is the open standard DRM, still on the picture. And what we see here is, I think, again, the question is broken, the bars between those who actually generate revenue versus the ones who are just the overall respondents. And so there is a different pattern for these two. And as you see, the proprietary DRMs are used in-house by a lot of vendors, but when it comes to generating revenue, the percentage drops significantly, and instead the rest of the DRMs, the standard DRMs like White One, Fair Play, and Play Ready increase. And that's again mainly maybe because of the studio's approval, because of again the fact that certain DRMs are again easy to be deployed by the multi-DRM service providers. So that's kind of the takeaway. Obviously, the main again conclusion is that still the market is fragmented, and again this ties back to the number of devices we had, right? So for a service provider, they have to support all these DRMs. So a multi-DRM cloud service is the only solution that can support again multiple devices, and that's basically the main conclusion here.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you've got multiple devices, so device fragmentation and multiple DRMs or DRM fragmentation, says there are a whole lot of attack vectors. And so when companies look at DRM solutions, they really need to start thinking about multi-DRM, because some DRMs are favored on particular devices. Obviously, Fairplay only covers the devices that are in the Apple ecosystem. So I think that's a really key takeaway there. Eric, if you could go on to the next slide. I think we actually here shifting gears to say, okay, now, we talked about geo-blocking, we talked about DRM, and what we've done in several of the last surveys is thrown in questions to say, what do you as a consumer expect that you would like to see as features, or in this case, what did our respondents see that their subscribers or customers wanted? And this is the balance for consumers. So everybody wants to lock their content down, but everybody wants their content to be accessible everywhere. And in this particular one, I think the two key takeaways are respondents understand that their customers want the ability to download and watch DRM protected content offline. 36% said that's very important to their customers, and 23% said that's somewhat important. You take the aggregation of that together, and clearly you're pretty close to the 2/3 mark. On the other side, how important is it for people to be able to watch content outside of their home country if they've paid for that? This has been a soapbox of mine for a number of years, because I, before COVID, traveled significantly. And again, here we see an even stronger number that the understanding is that consumers want, if they've paid for a service, they want to be able to access that service from anywhere, not just in their home geography. Ali, I don't know if you have anything to add on this one, but to me, these tell us that we have to have flexible DRM solutions that allow consumers to get what they pay for.
Absolutely, yes. And so again, one observation here is, like we talked about geo-blocking, which is really important to protect revenue and anti-piracy. On the other hand, you want your consumer to be able to consume the content again wherever they are, right? So the right balance between using those two is actually interesting, and that's really what the vendors have to look into. And then the offline streaming again. So yes, we are living in a connected world, but there's still a lot of applications for offline streaming, and that's what really we promote as a vendor. Besides our cloud-based multi-DRM service, offer offline streaming for, again, in-transit streaming services. And that's, again, another thing that we verified and validated from this report.
And I'll add one thing to that, and this sort of answers a question that came up in the Q&A. I remember I would sit on airplanes getting ready to travel abroad, and several times I've had a mother sitting, say, in a row in front of me or behind me with a little kid who's wanting to watch their OTT content offline. They've opened the OTT content the night before to make sure that it played fine, not realizing that they're setting off that 24-hour trigger. And then partway into the flight, the content stops working in an offline scenario because of the fact that they've reached that point. So it's not just a cut and dry scenario. There really, especially for in transit, are a number of flexibilities that solutions have to provide. So,
and if I can add that to that answer to that question. So basically the target here is that when you build your own devices, right? When you're using your iPad in the plane, right? You're actually consuming the high quality content, which has to be protected by DRM. So yes, for all the new content, early release content, when they're still in theater, or they're not still on the, after 45 days of, after the theatrical window, you want to watch them in the plane still or in the car, and they still need to have DRM. And that's where, when there's no connectivity, the offline DRM is needed. So I think that relates to the question that was.
Very much so. All right, Eric, let's go on to what I think is our final slide. And here again, we asked an open text question to people saying, okay, if you run on-prem instead of running in the cloud, why have you chosen to do so? And again, here we have 3 buckets. I think when you read the report, there's actually a 4th bucket for this. But essentially, one of the major concerns is cost concerns. The cost of actually doing a DRM solution in the cloud versus paying for it, from a CapEx model. That was one of the concerns. Second is the security concern. We don't want our media in someone else's care. And I think this probably goes to concerns around cloud-based services having breaches, just like other types of solutions having breaches, and what happens to the content from a security standpoint. And then finally, the feeling that, the on-premise solution that we have is adequate enough. In this case, the respondent was sort of highlighting latency as an issue, saying in some cases the on-prem servers provide faster access to high quality content. Ali, I'm going to open this up to you. I know we're down to the last 2 minutes or so, but what's your take from an Intertrust Express standpoint?
No, I want to highlight, first of all, when you say on-prem is adequate, right? Again, goes back to when we go back to the slide, not going back, but when you think about the slide that we had the number of views, right, per month, the smaller scale service operators, right, they don't need basically maybe the scale that is needed for a cloud-based platform, right? And they're okay with their on-prem system. So that's one of the things that made it goes back to those type of respondents. When it comes to cost concerns, right, there are really different tiering pricing from the cloud-based multi-DRM service providers like us, which basically we make sure that they are not going to pay more than the CapEx model, right? And so the idea here is that as you grow your subscriber base, first of all, we will make sure you get the features you need in terms of, again, scalability, in terms of low latency, in terms of being able to meet your peak demand. But at the same time, we make sure that you don't have to, pay the additional costs that when you used to when you have your CapEx model. So I think a lot of this is about education, how we actually make sure the service providers understand what is available for them to deploy as a cloud-based solution and with which cloud platform. I think we do have like additional information in the report that even looks into each of the cloud services like AWS versus Azure versus Google Cloud. That those are valuable information. We don't have time today right now, but we encourage the audience to go and look at the report for that.
Yeah.
Yes, we are coming up at the end of the hour, but we did have we had a couple of questions come in, and we kind of knew they would at some point, asking about cost. Because a couple points during the survey and the report, you discussed the fact that the investment you make in DRM is at least in part, or if not in its entirety, to guarantee that you can generate revenue. Do you have any data, and I guess this would be a question for Ali, about the cost per dollar earned, is how the person put it, for what do you spend on DRM versus what do you gain from it in revenue?
No, this is a great question, and it has been actually the topic and the challenge of the industry, the anti-piracy vendors in the last few years. It's really hard to put a dollar of what anti-piracy will bring back for you. You still have to look at how much you're losing, right? So all the reports you see how much revenue is lost due to piracy, right? And you don't have like a comparison of, if I earn this X dollar, what I should spend on anti-piracy. It's really similar to the cost of marketing, right? You need to spend that cost of marketing to get new subscriber. Same way, if you lose a subscriber to piracy, you're actually, you have to basically spend money on the anti-piracy to return that subscriber. There has been some recent researches in Europe, specifically, I know I saw case studies that show, for example, English Premier League or La Liga, what benefits they got from anti-piracy, and they have a $ sign assigned to it. There are some reports for that. Can point to those. We actually used some of those references in a report we had recently on content protection for sports with the Sports Pro Media. And so, yeah, I want to point to that. Like, I mean, it's really hard to quantify it, but there are some use cases that we have seen recently that try to, you know, help the industry to see what benefit they get.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That pretty much wraps up the questions. We had a few that came in earlier as well. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Ali. Thank you to Intertrust ExpressPlay for working with streaming media and Help Me Stream Research Foundation. And Tim just put the URL, the correct URL for Help Me Stream in the chat. It was incorrect in his screen name, so he'll know now to change that for the future. And Ali, the URL for ExpressPlay is expressplay.com, correct?
Yes, expressplay.com. Again, I want to thank you, Eric and Tim. You guys did a fantastic job on this research, and I had a really great time working with you to get this report ready, and very exciting insights from the audience.
Yeah, the feelings definitely mutual. And as I said earlier, if you're watching now, or even the people who just registered will receive a follow-up email that will contain a link to download the research brief without having to register again. It will also be going up on the streamingmedia.com site momentarily as soon as I sign off here underneath the research portion of the website. So you can download the report there. But if you go there, you got to register again. So if you want to just wait for the link in your email, you can download it without registering. Thanks again to Ali and Tim. Thanks again to everyone in the audience for participating and being here and sharing where y'all are from. Makes it a little more fun. I'm going to stay inside as long as I can without going into the cold sun. And just for being here, you are registered to win an Amazon gift card. Winner will be chosen at random on February 28th. So that just about wraps it up. Look for the research report on streaming media or in your email, and we'll see you soon. We've got Streaming Media Connect coming up in just a little over a week, and hopefully we'll see some of you back for that.